Clara's escape was not a clean one, nor was it without scars. The night she fled the man's estate, the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the ground was slick with rain that turned dirt roads into pits of mud. Her shoes sank deep, slowing her every step, yet fear gave her the strength to keep running. The man's voice had thundered behind her, barking orders to his servants, calling her a foolish girl who didn't understand she had been bought and paid for. Bought. The word pierced her heart more deeply than the cold night air ever could. She stumbled over roots, clawed through thickets, and pressed her hands against her belly, whispering desperate prayers that her child would survive the violent shaking of her flight. In those moments, Clara thought of Daniel, the boy she had once trusted, the one who had sworn he would marry her and build her a life away from her sisters. But Daniel had vanished the day she told him about the baby, his promises scattered like leaves in the wind. Alone, rejected and betrayed, Clara realized her heart had been far too tender for a world this harsh. She walked until dawn painted the sky in pale streaks, her legs trembling, her body aching for rest. Villages lay beyond the horizon, she knew, but fear kept her from entering them. What if her sisters had spread lies? What if the man she escaped from was searching the markets and inns, showing her face to every passerby? She couldn't risk it. So Clara hid herself in the forests, scavenging berries and drinking from streams, surviving day by day. Each sunrise a victory she counted for her unborn child. Hunger gnawed at her. Nights grew colder. Once she stumbled into a small town and begged for bread. But the baker's wife, seeing the swell of her belly and the dirt caked on her dress, curled her lip and spat on the ground, hissing that shameful girls had no place begging honest folk. Clara fled again, her cheeks burning with humiliation, her heart sinking deeper into despair. The weight of betrayal pressed on her, her sisters who had raised her only to sell her like livestock, Daniel who had loved her until responsibility came knocking, and now strangers who saw her not as human, but as a cautionary tale of sin. Still she walked. Still she carried the child. Each kick inside her was a reminder that she had something worth fighting for, even if the world had cast her aside. Yet she could not silence the question that haunted her. Where could she possibly belong, when even her own blood had sold her into misery? Ethan was not a man who went looking for company, nor was he a man who thought himself in need of it. The years had carved loneliness into him like rivers cutting through stone, shaping him into someone whose silence spoke louder than words. His ranch stretched wide beneath the endless sky, its fields golden with wheat and grass, its fences sturdy from his own calloused hands. But inside his cabin there was only emptiness. One plate at the table, one chair beside the fire, one bed he never fully slept in because dreams often dragged him back to the wife he had lost years before. So when he found Clara, her body frail, her lips cracked, her dress tattered, lying just beyond the line of his land, his first instinct was not tenderness, but caution. Strangers meant trouble, he knew that well. Yet as he knelt beside her and brushed the dirt from her face, the sight of her swollen belly stilled him. Here was not a thief or a schemer, but a girl who looked as though the world had chewed her up and spat her out. Without a word, he lifted her in his arms and carried her inside. When she awoke hours later, her first reaction was fear, eyes darting around the room, hands clutching at the blanket as if she expected him to harm her too. Ethan spoke little, but his voice was steady, calm, telling her she was safe here, that she could eat, that no one would touch her without her say. Days turned into weeks, and Clara, though hesitant, began to see truth in his quiet kindness. He worked the ranch by day, mending fences, tending to horses, and splitting wood, yet always left a portion of food for her on the table, and always checked the fire before leaving to make sure she was warm. At night she sat by the window, watching him move across the land with a steadiness she envied. Slowly she found herself speaking, first with short answers, then with longer confessions, until one evening she told him everything, about her sisters, about Daniel, about being sold as though her worth began and ended with her shame. She expected judgment, the same scorn the world had thrown at her. But Ethan only nodded, his jaw tightening not in disgust at her, but in anger at the cruelty she had endured. From then on, something unspoken began to grow between them. Not romance, not yet, but trust, the fragile root of a bond that could weather storms. He taught her how to feed the horses, how to gather eggs from the chickens, how to ride across the fields when her strength allowed. Clara, for the first time, felt she had a place, a purpose, even if it was small. Yet safety was never permanent. Her sisters had not forgotten her, nor the money they felt cheated of when she escaped. Word spread in nearby towns of a pregnant girl living on a lonely ranch, and soon whispers reached ears that should have remained deaf. One afternoon, Clara spotted a figure at the edge of the property, watching her with cold, familiar eyes. One of her sisters. Fear tightened her chest, but before she could speak, Ethan stepped in front of her. His presence solid, his voice like steel as he warned the intruder that Clara was no longer theirs to command. Rage burned in her sister's face. Promises of retribution hissed into the wind, but she left, knowing the rancher would not be easily swayed. That night, as Clara lay awake listening to the crickets sing beyond the walls, Ethan sat across from her, his hat resting on his knee, and said in his low, steady tone, "You're safe here. I don't care what they say. This land is mine, and anyone who wants to take you from it will have to go through me." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, for in all her life no one had ever stood for her that way. Weeks later, when the time came for her to give birth, the storm outside raged with thunder and lightning. But inside the cabin, Ethan knelt by her side, his rough hands steadying her, his voice guiding her through the pain. Hours of agony gave way to the piercing cry of new life, and Clara, exhausted and trembling, held her child against her chest as Ethan covered her shoulders with a blanket. In that moment, she realized the truth. She had lost her family, but she had found something greater, a protector, a friend, a man who had shown her that love did not always come, dressed in romance or blood ties. Sometimes it came in the form of shelter, of dignity, of a rancher who asked for nothing but gave everything. For the first time, Clara believed that perhaps she and her child could belong somewhere after all.